with a certain delay. I think we can say hello to Professor Inocent-Maria Vladimir Szaniszlo from the theological faculty at the University of Ružomberoku. Otherwise, the theology faculty is in Košice. His profession is moral theology, ethics, and political philosophy.
Yes.
And today he will have a lecture about processes of democratization in Catholic Church.
Yes.
So this is an important and very interesting topic. And as it's our habit, let's hear at professor's lectures first, and then there will be some time for your questions and to have a debate at the end.
Yes.
So, Professor Szaniszlo, welcome to Ljubljana, and the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Professor Andoljšek. I am very glad to be in Ljubljana the first time in my life, because I can some professors from Zagreb, but after our work in network of social ethics from Vienna with Ivan Štuec, that was very nice to have a possibility coming to theological faculty in Ljubljana. My doctorate I finished in Freiburg in Germany, but I was working in Fribourg in Switzerland about the work of Hannah Arendt, German Jewish philosopher Hannah Arendt, and after my doctorate, my habilitation was with the process of democratization and political communication in the Roman Catholic Church. After all the professors working about the work of Hannah Arendt. And very interesting was because my professor in Fribourg in Switzerland was died after 3 years, Roger Bertuzzo, and I was alone with 400 pages. I needed some other professor to finish my work. In the 90s it was not so easy to go back to the Slovakia and waiting at home. So I was parish in Switzerland 5 years ago, in Aargau, in Leibstadt, and that was the first idea to thinking about democratization, because you know the Swiss church is a very special church, and the diocese of Basel is also a very special diocese, and that was very interesting to see the relationship between the laity and the priest in the parish. It's really hard for one conservative Slovakian priest to see these relationships. And for this case, I was working about the democratization, and I found a really very interesting processes of democratization in our church. So, if we want to ask modern questions about democracy and democratization of our post-communistic society to which the church belongs, firstly we must understand and clarify the meaning of these words. It is difficult to evaluate today whether 24, 25 years ago we cared for the democracy of our Czechoslovak civil society, or we cared for its democratization. The word democracy is, according to the dictionary of foreign words in Slovakia, the principle of equal application of the will of all members of any group. And democratization means adjusting and organizing something according to democratic principles. French Jesuit Paul Valadier is very famous, and I was 2 or 3 times at a lecture of Paul Valadier, remind us how important it is to realize what the term democracy describes today. According to him, democracy reflects not only a form of society by Alexis de Tocqueville, taken as a whole social relations influencing policy, but also a social system whose individualistic principle is progressively extended to interpersonal relationships. At the same time, the institutional political system in which representative government controls the executive power. Finally, the concept of democracy may represent a culture of respect for the rules of democracy based on the recognition of democratic principles and values based on human rights. It's not so easy to understanding this definition. You know, today I have an interview for Slovenian TV with Peter Perse, and it was interesting to speaking about democracy because every people think we have freedom, we have democracy, but it's not enough. You need to be a democrat. You need to understanding, to be a free and to respect the others. In this case, you can build a democracy, a democratic system, like culture. As early as the 1940s, Santori noticed that we like democracy as a political system, even though we do not exactly know what in fact it really is. The Bishop of Vitebsk from White Belarus, from White Russia, Vladislav Blin, points out that even though it has already passed more than half a century since the fall of socialism, even today we live in an era of confusion concerning the term democracy. The very term demos, from which the concept of democracy derives, raises a number of uncertainties. Blind called it the problem of definition of people, demos, an unsolvable problem for democracy itself. However, as Santori adds, the modern definition of democracy is based primarily on the traditional interpretation of human rights, particularly on freedom and equality. The way to democracy, and especially to its application in the Church, began to be shown by the Church social doctrine of the popes in 19th century. Leo XIII is the first papal promoter of liberal democratic views. It's very interesting. I think we must a lot of time working about Leo XIII because his life was very important for respect for other cultures, for respect for other not Catholic societies in Europe, because he was nuntius in France after the French Revolution. That's very important. And after he was, I think, 25 years in a very little diocese, because it was very dangerous with someone that was in this culture. But the Pope, Pius IX, invited Leo XIII, after Leo XIII, in Vatican, and he was after a very, with 68 years, a very good bishop with a very good social doctrine about church. That was a very difficult time between feudalism and capitalism, between the aristocracy world and the simple peoples. For this case is for me Leo XIII a very great pope. Despite the fact that this important pope thinks about it in a critical way, he still rejects, after the church experience with the French Revolution, any form of Jacobin democracy. However, it is noteworthy that at the same time he disavows the forms of stately monarchy that had been accepted and preferred by the Church. Pope Leo XIII introduced the model of healthy democracy in the encyclical Libertas Praestantissimum, 1888. This model had been drawn up already by St. Thomas Aquinas. According to him, the Church, even in that time, was already prepared to accept the validity, independence, and sovereignty of any state, regardless of the state form, structure, and its own political system, if this state would serve to common good and would protect freedom and human dignity. Rejection of any governmental omnipotence and totalitarianism, which are incompatible with freedom and human dignity, is particularly seen in Quadragesimo Anno, the encyclical of Pope Pius XI of 1931. His definition of the subsidiarity principle provided the basis for the construction of democracy in the Church. The principle of subsidiarity, in accordance with human dignity, a sense of solidarity and sense of responsibility, advocates the entitlement to human rights and protection against governmental omnipotence of every human being without distinction. Complete recognition of democracy by the Roman Catholic Church was for the first time realized in the Christmas discourse called Benedictus by Pope Pius XII. There he spoke about a true democracy, in which moral quality of the representatives of people during World War II played the important role, and that time, because the fundamental political decisions in a democratic state would deepen on them. With the Second Vatican Council, the Church began to use other tools to better implement access to civil democracy. Article 75 of Gaudium et Spes represents all previous efforts to find that concept of democracy which is appropriate to the Christian faith. We find here such elements as the sovereignty of the people, equality before the law, separation of powers, the need for political parties, respect for diversity of views, pluralism, suspicion of danger of a very high concentration of governmental power, and so on. Concurrently are mentioned Catholic emphasis, the moral basis of natural moral love, the principle of subsidiarity, the common good, active participation, civil education, political courage and charity. Also, young Joseph Ratzinger underlines the opinion that the very concept of democracy should also include a significant religious heritage, making it also the task for the Church. Among the main points of possible democratizing efforts, he includes fraternity, functional understanding of authority, charisma, collegiality, synodality, and the people of God. Nevertheless, Ratzinger emphasizes that the public, social, and political explosiveness of the gospel will not operate by prescribed form, but rather as a liberal vocation that unifies the faithful and liberates them to their own initiative. One of the important statements of democracy as the political system of the Church, following the social encyclicals of Leo XIII and his followers, were the reflection of John Paul II, who himself experienced several totalitarian regimes and clearly knew know that dictatorships are always associated with abuse of power and violence, actual and structural, and the citizens under such regimes are not subjects of social lives but objects of manipulation. Bishop Blin refers principally to the fact that this system contributes to contempt of human dignity and violation of human rights. In the encyclical Solicitudo Rei Socialis, John Paul II believes that democracy can contribute to the development of the whole person and all people. But later, in the encyclical Centesimus Annus, Article 46, he adds that the principle of majority without moral spirit does not guarantee the establishment of fair state forms. Majority rule in a democracy always has to protect the minority or underprivileged groups and has to respect the moral approach that guarantee fair state in the form. Only then is it possible to create a successful social welfare state. At this point, there is a place for a useful social doctrine of the Church, the independent Church, which is not afraid to raise its voice in prophetic criticism if it deems it necessary. The popes clearly criticized lack of references to absolute and universally valid values in democratic ideals, because in their view, a person is dependent on the moral and natural love. They protested against the understanding of democracy, which would serve only as a method or technique for creating political order without any connection to irreplaceable values such as freedom or human dignity. A democracy which is not based on the morality of its citizens and their beliefs in faith, in freedom, in conscience, in human personhood, can lead, as Ratzinger well states, to tyranny, especially if the state is driven to perfection at any cost. We have the same situation now in Slovakia, for example. For the former communist, crypto-communist, we heard every time that moral and politics go not together. But you know, my answer is every time, who is a man is a morality. If not, it's very dangerous to live together with others. It's go to tyranny or to totalitarianism. Many people, and not only the younger, who have been raised in the time of media saturation, are increasingly asking questions about possible involvement in the process of democratization of the Church today, especially in Central Europe. However, at the same time, many of them point out the current unpreparedness of the Church, especially in communication with the faithful and with society. If we do not want to repeat the decline of the Western European Church in the 80s year, when at least half of its members resigned due to the very weak social dialogue, it would be useful to think about the scenes of sharing, dialogue, power and authority in this one of the oldest institutions in the world. The Church is not a beginner in this, even though it seems so at first sight. It has come a very long way toward acceptance of democracy as a system and also as a method of communication, and especially the accepting human rights inside the Church. That is a citation from Benedict XVI. The democratic elements call it dialogue, but which the Church leaders would orientate themselves in society through knowing about the joys and pains of their congregants, can lead to confidence and faith in today's society. These are the words of Pope Benedict XVI, who even as Cardinal Ratzinger in his reflections about connecting to Europe said that one who finds for Europe finds for democracy, but associated to ammonia. Even Pope Paul VI attempted to analyze the role of the Church as well as that of the Pope based on democratization and consequently on some form of dialogue. In the encyclical Ecclesiam Suam he writes, "Dialogue is evangelization. The Church must enter into dialogue with the world in which it lives. It has some things to say, a message to give, a communication to make." The Pope understands the transcendental origin of dialogue in God's intentions. There is a recognition that the development of dialogue leads to deepening of knowledge, renovation of expressions, discovery of elements of the true in others' opinions, and makes wise teachers. He also sees dangers in making dialogue and particularly highlights the importance of truth. The effective apostle is the man who is completely faithful to Christ's teaching. He alone can remain unaffected by the errors of the world around him, the man who lives his Christian life to the full. Hence, with this beneficial advice to dialogue in the Church, he exclusively combines dialogue with obedience. It's true in this time, in 16 years. On the occasion of finding answers to the question of democratization in the Church, we must not forget the concepts of power, authority, and their use, because one of the issues to address to the Church is its understanding of power. One of the authors who were concerned with the issues of the Church authority and the appropriate dealing with it is Karl Gabriel. He seeks a sociological answer looking at the phenomenon of a long tradition of ecclesiastical power. Unlike Weber and Foucault, with their dominant enforcement power that lies in the exercising their own will be force, Gabriel finds a theory of Hannah Arendt which is based on mutual consent and authorization of the members of some social society. To this theory, a model focused on comments and obedience is not sufficient, because a concept based on such an authority would not be suitable for the Church. At the same time, the importance of power in the Church must also be acknowledged. Church, citation, without the authority would become a church, then ceases to exist as a social group. The Church will always have groups on global levels and throughout their common action at the level of dioceses, parishes, and within specific groups on the parish level that will protect the power in their effective social existence, dependent on the consent of members of the group. According to Gabriel, even bishops, as a formal bearers of power in their bishoprics, are able to exercise this power only if they find people of consent in the Church. In this context, as well as for the Pope, a problem arises for bishops how to achieve the acceptance of the acquired power by ecclesial community without simply resorting to the formal authorization of actions from above. The essential question to use is how to maintain the functioning of this common religious community, how to keep it in dialogue. In the future, there may be another similar phenomenon of a power vacuum in the church. It may be caused by the fact that without the mutual consent of the members of the church, no new formation of power in the church will arise. This points out that the church of modern times has solely focused on authority as an undeniable recognition of its right to obedience. Arendt sought for power conferred by people. She wants to avoid the means of violence, which she considers one of the typical response to the loss of power. Gabriel supports this thesis, saying that where recognition and support is missing, forms of power gain significance in Foucault's terms, and this referred to the church as well as to society. Another author who energetically undertook the reform of the church according to the theory of Hannah Arendt was the Canadian theologian and dean of the faculty in Montreal, Robert Major. Major fights for more space for laity in the church, especially greater participation in decision making. He respectfully describes Arendt's view to highlight freedom in policy and governance. At the same time, he reveals the logic of the private sector for the church. Thus, on the one hand, there is an attempt for a public dialogue with the word, even an attempt to leadership or the right alignment of the word, and on the other hand, the language and logic of family and fraternity that on the contrary belong to the private sector. This famous theory of Hannah Arendt, what is for public sector and what is for private sector. For example, family is for private sector, and we must leave private sector to be free to dialogue with others. A little bit idealistic about Greek democracy, but interesting for me also. Major emphasis that exactly this model of fraternity shows religion's disaffection to the word. Citing Leonard Boff, Major says that the church demands a private logic on the way to maintain its power, and wants to establish a real public dimension of its power on the basis of this logic. The church maintains control of the aspiration for equality and decision making according to the document Christe Fidelis Laici. Thus, what is essential in the practice of power in the church is the status of equality in the church, according to Major. Simultaneously, this equality exceeding the opposition clergy laity allows finding freedom for Christians, and this freedom must be actively manifested and used by them. The whole effort of the church, the whole politics in the church, democratization, sensus fidelium, change of ordinance services, freedom of speech, etc., is a living space, which is based on the equality of believers and focused on full fulfillment in freedom. Here, however, it is worth realizing that the issue is not whether the church should be showing up and giving itself to the word through the Spirit in order to gain power. Not at all. Showing the church to the world is a constructive dimension of God's action, who takes upon himself humanity in Jesus Christ in order to seize the profound dimension through the Holy Spirit and make history. Therefore, the Church is involved in the dynamics of giving up its ownership of God, of truth, and of the future in favor of researching for God in the world, just because this is its heritage, its cleros, were implementing power. In this sense, since power in the Church doesn't have any political and practical sense. Power in the Church in this sense is just a method that helps people, assembly, community to seek God in the world. Another democratic element that belongs to the tradition of modern, authentic theological source of God's appearance is also the consensus of the faithful, consensus fidelium. In this case, it concerns the possession of theological belief and the gift of God. This belief from its very nature requires a deep agreement of heart and spirit with the Church. This means that God's people are unmistakably connecting to faith under the guidance of the magisterium of the Church through the supernatural scenes of faith, sensus fidei. It is a feeling all the people from the bishops to last of the lay faithful. The above-mentioned dialogue between the Church and the world can better help to illustrate the concept of Church as sacrament. Major finds the concrete form of public space in the Church in 3 points. Define this in Hannah Arendt's theory to maintain tension in the Church between those who depend on public space and what should remain private. In the second point, he refers to the need, even in the Church, to strictly distinguish authority from power and to encourage appropriate tension between them. The last point, according to Major, is promotion and the return to pluralism in the Church, which are understood to mean equality and diversity, by which the social equality of all its members, regardless of the gender, character, race, etc., gains ground. In conclusion, Major proposes the establishment of new church structures based on 2 principles, synodality and subsidiarity. Following Arendt, he is in favor of the establishment of a religious order which must cooperate in order to balance the accumulated power between lay people and the authority of holy service in the Church. In order to find an answer to this vision, Major recommends going the way of psychology, but his whole idea seems very idealistic and in need of practical confirmation. That's my notice. Let us also reflect on the post-Vatican II thoughts of US Bible specialist John L. Mackenzie, Jesuit. Mackenzie argues that although it is natural to understand the authority of the Church as a kind of power, in the light of the New Testament, this understanding of ecclesiology is seen to be mistaken. Furthermore, the line between the implementation of power and outright tyranny is extremely fine and can be determined only after an exact definition of the ecclesiastical authority. To this end, Mackenzie cites the famous American theologian John M. Todd, who claims that the power supporting a dual evolution is the only legitimate human power. In this sense, the exchange of existence of other items and services for the benefit of everyone is indispensable for the evolution of individual and common life. Any power that claims the right to exceed this condition is tyrannical and undermines individual and communal lives. Karl Rahner also confirms that the power to dominate does not belong to the church, because its goal is to bring their subordinates into a status of spiritual maturity in which they are not longer liable. Mackenzie emphasizes that the church is a liberal, consensual community, therefore it is not a case of a natural state community. The church is fundamentally different from other communities in its objectives and means, which are specific goals of the church. This power in the church, even if understood in political terms, must therefore not be assimilated with the state. Any similarities are only analogical. Although the concept of power and various elements of the internal structure of the church are not state-owned, they is still under the influence of culture, nation and state, in which the church exists and fulfills its mission. Regardless of where it exists, the church must still avoid two dangers: an escape from culture, the word, and profanization, secularization. I did yesterday a first lecture about the secularism and secularity in the modern society, and this is also for me a very interesting theory, because from one side we need religious dimension for our life. Without this dimension, we are not enough people. From the other side, we have a danger to thinking we have a phone, we have a handy to heaven. For example, by a human catastrophe in the world. That was my first experience in my life, to hearing some priest preaching about God's finger or God's punishing when, for example, was the tsunami in Thailand, or some tremblement de terre, earthquake in Algeria and in Turkey. It's very wrong to speak by this way, because we haven't fallen to heaven, and this is very dangerous to explain by this mode the situation, the catastrophe in our world. You need some distance from God, because you are not God. From the other side, we need also the element of religious, because we must be a full human people. That's very. And from the other side, secularism is dangerous. Life without God doesn't exist. But from the other side,
but we have to find a certain balance.
Yes.
Between these two, let's say, situations. Especially in Slovenia, we have quite strong secularization. For example, there is not allowed the religion to have in the ordinary state schools, for example.
Okay.
Then there is not allowed practically to discuss almost in the TV about the religion, and so I think we are in a very funny situation where we need ethics, we need morality, we need these good habits came from the Holy Bible, yes, from the Jesus himself. On one hand, but on the other hand, some people would like to push the religion away from the ordinary life, from the everyday's life.
Now, that was the Marx-Leninism theory. Religion is something from Middle Age. Yeah, you know, in my children's it was very difficult to go to religion because all the teacher spoken that this is not modern man because he is believed to God and this was really very difficult. I like to go to the gymnasium, to lycée, and it was dangerous to go to the religion because the teacher say it's not good communist people.
And what's the situation in Slovakia like? So it's similar to Slovenia. How would you estimate the secularization? Let's say so.
From one side, because my study was in Czech Republic, in Olomouc, like Dominican, Slovak and Czech Dominican together, and the Czech society is a really atheistic society. Only 10% we have a Christian in Czech Republic. Slovak society is completely others because 80% we have a Christian in Slovak society. But we have not a distance or a difference between to be a communist and to be a Christ today. That's very, very dangerous. All the people was silent in the communist time, and we need the working about our mistakes during the communist time. Because it's not normal that also the Christian, also the priests and few bishops think communistic, with communist ideas about it. He was a very good Christian, but the communist was also good. It's not a problem. It's something like state and church together.
But they forget on the not on the freedom, because you know the communists are, or the socialist political system doesn't allow freedom, so the people don't have their own rights.
Yes.
They don't. So it is a totally something what it's not according to what we would like to stress.
But you know what happens now with the war of Crimea? We have once more the problem with the culture in Europe. Which culture we have? And especially in Slovakia, we have a really problem because we are at the front with Ukraine, with Byzantine culture, with relationship between church and state. And this is very dangerous. And this is a value of the Western culture, to separate it, church and state, society, civil society, and religious society.
Yes, I can agree with you to separate church and the state, but to leave each of these entities to be free of each other.
Yes.
Let's say so.
Yes.
Not to allow state to influence on the church.
Yes.
This is not the secularization from my point of view.
Yes.
But unfortunately, this is the situation quite often. This kind of situation is quite often.
And I explained the cultural situation in Czech and Slovak Republic, but the situation, political situation between church and society is a little bit other. We live a post-communistic society. So all the medias are hand in hand of the modern people, of the people without religion. We have also the very great problem to be in dialogue on TV, for example, on radio. Sure, we have Catholic radios, Catholic TVs, but Catholic radios is only for 1% of the society, or Catholic TV. TV Lux and Radio Lumen. But we have really a very, very big problem to be accepted by the modern culture society in Slovakia. And also from the part of church, because the position of the church in the communist time was closed. Not dialogue with this society. And we have a lot of priests, a lot of bishops came from one seminary from the communist time. That was numerus clausus, one seminary in Bratislava. Today we have 6 priests seminary, but the situation is not other. We have a really problem to speak with society. For a lot of priests, for a lot of clergy, is society not important. We have true, we don't need a dialogue. And this is very dangerous, because from the other side, for the culture society from Slovakia, the culture don't need a church. Church is not important.
But how was the situation? You mentioned at the beginning of your lecture. You mentioned the situation in Basel.
Yes.
You said that the situation there influences your future work. So obviously there should be a dialogue between the church and the society, or what was the situation? Please describe that.
From one point of view, Basel is extreme, really extreme, because that was
which way?
For example, in our decanate, I was working. There was only 3 priests and 25 women, like parish. A woman like the first theologian of Canton Aargau. Woman like first chief of house of exercise, for example, and that is not bad, but it is too earlier to think about this, and it was really a chaos, anarchy. From the other point of view, you receive money from the council of parish, not from bishop. So you're dependent of council, and to be independent, it's very hard. I was independent because I was one Catholic conservative from East, but for a lot of priests, it's not possible to be independent because you need this money. And it's now what doctrine you have if you are dependent on council of parish. That is, from my point of view, extreme from democratization. We need something between. From the other side, for example, in our Faculty of Theology, I have a few doctorate that finished with me, and it's very difficult to see today that if you're not a priest, you cannot teach moral theology, for example. And now is the situation. He has a very good bioethics, my former doctorand, and he cannot stay in this vocation. He must find something others for life, like doctor of theology, because it's not possible to teach theology for life. That's other extreme for me. Yes.
You are quite critical to the Slovak church, the Catholic Church in Slovak Republic.
Because I love this church.
Yes, of course. But your criticism is focused on what? The lack of a dialogue. Yes. So the Catholic Church in Slovak Republic doesn't communicate with the society.
Yes.
So they are closing themselves into the churches, let's say so. What would you advise them or us? How would you cure this situation?
You know, at the first we must accept it, our processus to rise. This is not easy, because what was Slovakia? Slovakia was a part of Hungarian. And it was the last part of Hungarian state, of Hungarian kingdom. And our character, I was spoken yesterday with Ivan, our character was a slave character. Not speaking about something, only accepting the authority and following authority to have a good place. And democracy needs dialogue. For democracy, we must going in process.
Dialogue on what? On which topics?
About all what is possible. What say Hannah Arendt? Only in dialogue about things, about really important things to public. Can we see
so
true?
Not the dialogue on doctrine, on this.
Why not? We can every time speaking also about the dogma, but other people must accept it that we have a dogmas in Catholic Church, not only in the Catholic Church. A few other religions have also the dogmas, but we must. It must be possible to speak about this, and not only to say it's not possible. Every critic is something like attacks in our church now in Slovakia. You know, the affair for me with Archbishop Bezák, for example. Without dialogue, all the society is really not understanding with this form of church. And after, you know, the Czech bishop was in Rome at Ad Limina, and the Czech bishop was spoken about our Archbishop Bezák, not the Slovak. In Slovakia is silence about this. But in the society, not only Catholics, also Protestant people ask me about Bishop Bezák. For all the live society, he is someone. It's not true. It's exaggerated. But for a lot of people from the society, he is a hero. He was a young, he spoke with the young generation, he was loved by the young generation, and Tutaku, after 3 years, he was left from without a reason till now. And you know, if the church is silent only, that's very, very bad thing for because from the other side, from the theory of Saint Thomas Aquin, you need belief in how. We are reason. We are created by God. We have all in our. Don't be afraid to have a liberty to speak about everything. And you know, the Saint Thomas Aquin was prohibited in Paris after died 100 years.
You mentioned also the communication between clerics and, let's say, lay people. So you described that lay people should have a more important role in the church. Okay, I would like to hear from you. What do you think? So where, in which, not places, but what could be a more important role of lay people? And on the other hand, let's say. On which topics? So, I suppose not just to have a dialogue, but
it's exactly what I mean. If we doing only from the church private part, or like the family, that is dangerous. Because private, in this case, you need only a little group of priests. You can believe only a little group of priests, for example, because one economist from lay can be dangerous for us, for example. And it was, in fact, in history. Also, our convents was a lot of money was stolen from, for example, from economists. But at the first, you need a public relation, responsibility relation, normal relation with also punishing for this. And you see, for example, Benedict XVI, in the case of sexual abuse, he was very strong, because the last theory was silent about this. And he is going to give a punishing, the state punishing from this case of abuse. And that was very important for us. It's new, really new thinking in our church. Because we have not enough priests today. Our society today is very complicated to have so many vocation, and also from this vocation, not all the priests are really leadership in parish. You need economists, but not only economists, cultural manager in parish, for example. We have the possibility and the theological faculty
to manage the cultural heritage.
Yes, the concerts, the exhibitions, all the cultural discussions about the history, about the future of the European Union, about the future of the culture between Russia and West Europe. You need a manager for this. It's not possible only to have someone that will be completely benevolent, because it's possible to pay also. And for example, for theological faculty, that will be a very good thing to have a cultural manager inside the church, like study.
But which country or which system do you think would be the best? So you said your system in Slovakia, it's not okay. It's too conservative or too close, so it's not enough open for the dialogue. The situation in Swiss is also on the other side of the horizon. You probably studied studied others, so other states or other systems. So where do you think there is a right balance between communicate, in which country the state or the church communicates openly with the society, also attracts lay people to be part of a dialogue.
I was last time 8 years in Austria, in Burgenland. In the parish from Burgenland, I was traveling every month to Košice for 1 week and doing the blog teaching. And from Burgenland is special. It was Hungary, once millenarium, and only in 90 years it's Austria. But this complicated Eastern people, like Austrian people today, is a very big success from one side. But church is also in Austria not accepted by the society today. That is because we have a problem to explain us, really explain for the young people to understanding which is the teaching of the church. And for this, you need a confiance. You cannot be. Of course, you can be every time radical. For example, radical for life. We go before the hospital with red hands. We speak about the killers. But this action has also a reaction in this moment. And you need this society. You need to explain your point of view for this society, not only during the wars between. Because in this case, you are completely on the other side. And what you ask, it's different from culture and processes of culture. Also in West countries, not only in East countries. But from the other side, after communism, our church we has had in this time 1,500 seminarists in Slovakia, 1995.
And now?
200 now. It's very interesting, because our church was very proud. Our faith is standing after communism. We are very strong, and we can show to Western decadence that we are strong. But today we have a really great problem to speak with society. We have a really problem to explain our positions. Because if you have only some extremists in the church, in this moment all the society this is the church, and that's not true. In the church it's normal to have extreme from one to the other side. That must be respected. We have also liberal in the church, not only the right conservative people.
Okay, thank you, Professor. Are there any questions from the audience? some views, maybe some.
It will frozen.
You are invited also to share your views on the topic or to. No. Okay, then. So I think I also asked you practically everything what I wanted to question, to ask you. So how could you summarize your lecture? So I think one very important point of view is a dialogue. So to have a dialogue with the society. The other point is freedom. So the democracy is not freedom. There is no direct connection between the democracy and the freedom.
No.
This was the second point of view. Then you mentioned also the family as something private. I think this is also something new somehow, because if something is private, then the state shouldn't influence to this. So are there some other aspects which would you like to stress at the end before we finish this?
So, human rights, that's not only term for the politics. Human rights is also, and that's really the citation from Benedict XVI, human rights we must define inside the Catholic Church. Mm-hmm. Also for liar, for all the people. Mm-hmm. And what is this human right? To listening to the others and to working together, not only to speaking about this. Mm-hmm. We need this case, and we need also to understanding after communism time, because from communism we have only one type of persons. You must be actual, full of action, and this the type of person. It's not true. The Saint Thomas from Aquin said we have a lot of type of persons: contemplative, active, or something in the middle. And you must accept it also in the church. For example, from the moral theology, we have a moral systems. 7 moral systems in the Catholic Church. Probabilism, equiprobabilism, etc. It's not only one. So you accept the conservative people, but the conservative must accept also the other people. The discoverer of liberty is the St. Paul. We are free people in Christ, Jesus Christ. It's fantastic. Mm-hmm. And also authority, and utilize of authority is very necessary in today. And Hannah Arendt say authority without repression, for example, is very important. Mm-hmm. Authority that respect the other, they like to following the same goals together. I think the Pope Franciscus is a very good example for this.
Okay, Professor Szaniszlo, thank you very much for your lectures and for all the knowledge you shared with us. Thank you very much.
I thank also.
Hvala tudi vam, da ste se udeležili našega dogodka in na tretjo potenco, in s tem seveda tudi želimo vsi pridobili nek nov pogled v temo, ki jo je profesor predstavil. Hvala lepa še enkrat in lahko noč.
Ďakujem.